Thank you for joining me on the Fire Rescue Wellness Podcast. I'm your host, AZ. I find the research and resources and then provide the fire service with the so what, now what, to ensure the health and well-being of every member of our profession. Together, let's thrive. Hello, it's AZ and this is episode 188, and today you are going to get to listen to my friend Dr. Tessa Koschel. She has a really impressive resume, and I will attach it in the show notes, but she is the innovator behind Fitness Therapy Coaching and Consulting, which is a program utilizing anthropology and neurophysiology to elicit apex human performance. She has a really strong connection to the tactical field. She is married to an Iraq war veteran and the daughter of a military family. Her husband is now an emergency room physician, and she works closely with first responders on cognitive control and also perinatal performance. So actually, the first time I met her, she was carrying a bunch of pregnancy bellies at an NSCA conference. She's amazing. You're going to love her. All of her contact information is in the show notes, and she so graciously invited you to reach out if you had any questions. Have a great day, and thanks for listening. So fun. Hey, listeners, it's AZ with the Fire Rescue Wellness Podcast, and I'm here with my friend Tessa Koschel. Say hello.
Hello.
I am really excited for this conversation, and you were one of my recent presenters at the Women's Tactical Human Performance Summit. I've been asking people what they thought about that. What did you think about that experience?
Empowering is the word that comes to mind. Man, it is not possible to not leave that room without feeling unstoppable as a female.
I kind of feel the same way. It was such a great group of people and presenters, and well, we have a date for next year already, so it's going to be May 29th. So if you want to hang out,
needs to be there. If you miss the inaugural, sign up now. Run.
Don't
walk. Yeah.
I love it. I am a super lazy podcast host in that I make my guests introduce themselves to the listeners, but I have 3 questions that I ask you. So the first one is, and you can answer these any way you want to, who is Tessa?
Ooh, who is Tessa? A woman of many hats. I'm a mom and a wife, and I am a warrior for women. Absolutely. And I am one that believes in the anthropology of, and the very foundation of our happiness lies in our very mammalian instincts that modern society gets in the way of. I have a history of being a collegiate athlete, going on to being a collegiate coach. These are both in track and field. Which then led me into the weight room. I touched my first weight when I was 16 years old. And there's a quote from the Weeder brothers. It says, if you're born to the iron, you know the first time you touch a weight, right? And I just felt that in my soul. It still gives me goosebumps, right? If you're born to the iron, you know it the first time you touch a weight. And I've never let go of the weight since I started at 16, which was new then for females to be so very drawn to it. So that helped me in my collegiate track and field career, and then helping my athletes as I was a coach. And that led into strength and conditioning coaching when I went on to get my master's in applied health sciences. And then from there went into research, and how, exercise positively influences both diseased and non-diseased populations for Anschutz Medical Campus in Colorado. And then I knew then that I needed to go on and get my Ph.D. because I knew growing up, coming from we'll call it a neurodivergent, neuromaladaptive family, that I knew exercise made me happier. And then I watched that reoccur in my athletes and in my students. And I needed to know why. I needed to know more about it. And so that's when I went on to get my PhD.
I took a note while you were talking neuromaladaptive family because we're going to definitely circle back to that. I also want to add just a little bit of factual, because I saw it with my own eyes, factual information about who is Tessa. Mm-hmm. Tessa is a brave woman who rapped while dancing in 3-inch heels and a jumpsuit at the conference. It was incredible. The guts on this lady. I cannot. All right. Next question. What sets your soul on fire?
The silence, there's so many things running through my head, right? What really sets my soul on fire is helping people find their true happiness, that I like living their best lives as far as mind and body. It's just, I have always been a cheerleader of other people. I want to see people succeed, and whether that's my family, whether that's my clients, whether that's my students, like I am genuinely pumped to see people do their best, and be their best selves, like change their lives, like how they respond to life, how they engage with life, as far as adventure and cognitive control and exercise and just becoming the best version of themselves. Like I hope that you can feel it, that it's palpable, because it is my favorite thing to do.
There's nothing better than watching someone else glow up. It's the best. I love it. So that kind of dovetails nicely into the last question, which is, how are you, my dear, changing the world?
I think I'm changing the world by putting us in reverse. People tell me in good ways, not some of the other ways that perhaps are not great right now. But as far as, again, returning back and referring back to our innate anthropology of who we are as mammals and, how we're made to operate. I think modern life has just made it so difficult to live a healthy life mentally and physically. It's very tough, specifically in the United States. You have to move with purpose to create a healthy life here, in many facets, as far as work-life balance, as far as nutritional intake, as far as mindset control, all of those things. It's financially even. So being able to take a step back and go back to the basics of, this is what we were made to do out in nature as hunter-gatherers. This is how we were, this is how we naturally tick. This is how we naturally thrive. And while we can't get back to that, and I'm not saying, we need to get rid of everything, go back to living in the wild, but perhaps moving in that direction would help people to be a little bit more a little happier in life. Yeah.
As you were talking, I was reminded of a book I read several years ago called The Comfort Crisis. Have you read that one by Michael Easter? Listeners, I'm going to tag it in the show notes because he says, I can't remember, it was so elegant how he put it, but our lifespan is longer than ever, but our health span is shorter than it's ever been. So we're living these incredibly long lives as incredibly unhealthy people. It's really sad.
It's awful. And what people don't realize, so just yesterday I was on a flight with a young man. I'm aging myself, a young man. He's turning 30 this week.
Like my age. Tessa, my age.
No, me too. Just a few years removed. And, I was talking to him about that, about, these cancers and these things that we deal with, later in life. So we think, begin in our 20s. They begin when we're teenagers. They begin when we're young children, and what we're consuming, how we're moving or not moving, the areas that we live, what we're exposed to, and sometimes we don't see those until our 60s and our 70s, but those are repercussions of what you're doing in your very early years.
Yeah. It's It's really critical to live a good, healthy life for our entire lives. But I'm going to try to tie this together neatly with a bow, and I'm not sure I'm going to be able to do it. But as you probably know, and as my listeners likely have heard me say before, we are drawing people into these careers, police, fire, and military. Now, my specialty is fire, but I have a big heart for police and military as well. We're drawing people into these careers that have had adverse childhood experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Abuse, neglect, other bad crap that happens to kids. And you had mentioned a neuro maladaptive family experience. And you also talked about this at the women's conference.
Mm-hmm.
And first of all, is it okay to dig into this a little bit?
Absolutely. It was my motivation for everything that I do.
Okay, wonderful. Mm-hmm. So can you sort of describe some of what went on during your childhood that you would kind of say was maladaptive?
Yeah. So I definitely have parents that diagnosed mental health disorders that have been irregularly managed with medications. So there was a lot of sway in there. The situation was fluid always.
A very dynamic childhood situation. Can relate.
And and those things, unfortunately, are hereditary. And so I understood early, like, so there's nature and nurture, and sometimes you get hit with both in ways that you don't appreciate and don't want, but you don't realize that is not normal, quote unquote. If there is a normal, I won't say normal. It is not healthy behavior. You don't realize that it's not healthy behavior until you're out of the situation. And so what happened there? So I learned. There was just a lot of emotions. There was no emotional control. There's no cognitive control. It was just, if an emotion came out, it came all the way out in very unproductive ways onto everybody else and everything else that was going on. And I didn't know that was not conducive to a healthy or productive lifestyle. And it wasn't until I went to I'm going to spill the beans here, and you're just going to learn so much. So I went into college, undergrad, still just being wildly emotionally uncontrolled, with some definite learned behaviors that I didn't know I needed to release yet. And I met the man that's now my husband. And we were together for a few years. And then we got into, a college night altercation, which ended up with me in handcuffs. So, yes.
Girl.
And so it was not a great situation. And when the dust settled, he was like, I cannot be with you. He's like, you're crazy. He's like, this isn't healthy, is the words he says to me. And he goes, I do not want this to be what my future children witness. Mm. Yeah. Talk about a change, right? And here I am, like, I'm running track and field, and I'm, a successful athlete. I'm a successful student. I was the commencement speaker in school. I was in Psych National Honor Society, and still just wildly emotionally and cognitively dysregulated. Nature and nurture. And it took that to understand, like, this is the love of my life. And I knew that he's also my best friend. Clearly now we've been married for 18 years. We've been together for 23, and it took that to be like, he's right. This is not something that I want to pass down to future generations. And so that set me on the path right there. That was my first real dive into behavior change and cognitive control before I really knew a whole lot about it.
So talk to me about, so now you have this realization. What do you do with it?
Yeah. What do you do with it? So, so back then, do you remember the rubber band snapping? Do you remember?
Yes. Yes.
So that was the first like behavior or cognitive control change, right? That if you're trying to disengage a behavior, that every time you go to do it, you snap the rubber band on your wrist, and that really didn't work.
I can imagine not.
Here's what did work, is being aware of the science, being aware that you actually can change the neurosynaptic connections in your brain, which translate to your behaviors. You are not a prisoner to the neurological composition that you were born with, and that it is difficult, but if you continue time and again, just like an exercise routine, just like, job training, if you show up for yourself time and again and you stop the behavior in the middle of it, before it even really ramps up or gets going, right? And you repeat time and again, and you exercise that willpower, you can change.
And I think that many of our public safety personnel have more than likely had similar experiences, or maybe not similar, but I'm going to say it, similar experiences. And they haven't maybe gotten to the point that you got to, where someone said, hey, cut it the F out. And so did you have help? Did you have assistance, like mental health counselor or someone that walked you down this path? Or did you kind of raw dog this yourself?
So I was at one point forced to go to a year of anger management classes.
Okay.
Repercussion for that evening.
Okay.
It was, if I'm being honest, they were kind of a joke at that point. But it did spur me to look. I was a psychology major, right? So who did help me was my mentor at the time, in my psychology department, who gave me the research, of and promised me that this is not something that I had to live with, so she guided me, but she did not. She's not a clinical psychologist. She's an exercise. She's a professor, right? She's an academic. So, but she believed in me, and she told me the science of it, that it could be changed, and that in and of itself set me on a new path that would shape my future. And I think going back to what you said about, yes, you're right. I spoke about this at the NSCA TSAC conference last year, that there is a large percentage of personnel in the tactical community that come from neuromaladaptive homes, we'll call it that. And they grow up to be tactical people, to keep other people safe where they were not able to do that themselves, right? And I think the hard part is, so in the research right now, there's what we call expected value of control, and essentially it's your capacity to decide when you want to exercise cognitive control. And so, as I mentioned to you, there I was, like a very successful track and field athlete, doing very well in college, in academics, but still being wildly out of control in other areas of my life. And I think that could be the same for the tactical population. I've seen this, my husband is a veteran. He's now an emergency physician. I work a lot with first responders. I work a lot with physicians, trauma, ER physicians. And they exercise so much cognitive control in their professional life that they're just exhausted of doing so. The cognitive fatigue when they get home is real. So to then have the willpower and the cognitive ability to try to also regulate your emotions in your personal space is tough.
I'm reminded of a coworker, and so I do not have a coworker named Jason. So this coworker will be Jason. I'm reminded of Jason, who on a daily basis at work, the best way I could describe it would just be lose his shit. So everyone was on eggshells, because when Jason was having a bad day, everyone was having a bad day. And Jason had a bad day like 99% of the time. And so I can't imagine that it was any better once he went home to his family. So now he's making his fire family miserable. He's making his home family miserable. I can only imagine. How does one, because your husband did it with you, but I just remember everyone at work, including supervisors, just being like, oh, that Jason's just being Jason. That's how he is. And no one was ever willing, including me, to experience the wrath of Jason to get anything done. How do we interact with these people?
That is, I mean, it's an excellent question because nobody wants to set off a ticking time bomb, right? Chances are that Jason, that is his normal, right? Like, was his normal growing up, likely. That behavior is likely learned. I don't know that for certain. Odds are, statistics tell us that's a learned behavior. And it is quite possible that he is unaware, like it's become so normal to him that he's unaware of the repercussions for everybody else. And so someone needs to essentially call him out on it, in a place that comes from caring, from love, whatever you want to call it, compassion that, hey, you seem not well. And that consistent cortisol drip is not healthy. And it is deterring your quality of life and that of everybody around you, so we're concerned, that, like, essentially, like, why are you mad, bro? Like, right? Like,
what's your problem, bro?
Like, but it takes someone, you can't come at someone who you can't come at it with anger, it has to become a place of compassion, come from a place of compassion. And I think also just realizing, like, bringing it to light, this is a thing. And then maybe they're willing to speak to someone who can dive deeper into the why and how and where this came from. Yeah.
It's an incredibly volatile situation that I'm happy to not be in anymore, because wow. So you mentioned, I think it might have been before we hopped on the recording though, using exercise as a catalyst for cognitive control. Now I have a lot of questions about that, but I want to ask you, what do you think would have happened with you had you not been competing in track and field at a high level and exercising all the time? Do you think that your volatility would have been even higher?
It's terrifying to think about, honestly. I often think about if I'd never gone down this road. If I had never learned that these behaviors were unregulated, were unhealthy. I know that I come from a family of addictive personalities, and exercise happens to be a healthy one. And so that's really great. But I've had others in my family who have had similar battles with addictions that are not healthy, that exacerbated these behaviors. And they also had to fight through those in their own ways. A different path, a different way about it. So I think that there's different ways of doing it, right? Of fighting through it. There's different timelines for everyone of when they're ready to move forward. I talk to my clients a lot about what is your compelling purpose? Because in my experience, it takes someone having a compelling purpose to move past that behavior. So there has to be something you love more than the behavior you're currently engaging in. So for me, my future husband, the health and stability of my future family, that's a compelling purpose. Like, again, gives me goosebumps even to say it, because my children to this day, if somebody yells. Like we have assertive conversations, a lot is expected of them. Like, right. My husband, we expect a lot of them. And also there is no yelling in our house. And so that's a really beautiful thing. Yeah.
That is a beautiful thing, because I think from someone whose nervous system grew up probably much like your nervous system grew up, not feeling safe as a little person, the fact that people can respect me enough to not yell at me and have a hard conversation is, well, you said it earlier, it gives me goosebumps. It's so powerful, that communication, the caring, quiet communication, even when you're conveying expectations. It's so powerful. And so how then does exercise relate to that cognitive control? Talk me through that.
Yeah. So let's say, when people generally, clients reach out to me when they've found their compelling purpose, and they want to change. There's a reason, there's something, that, I'm tired of living this lifestyle. I see the detriment. Maybe, Jason, you said he's like, hey, maybe he gets to that point after that conversation. He's like, I'm ready to not make life hell for everybody around me. So how do I do that? And I've watched people engage in, I myself had to do years of counseling when I was a young child. I never found it helpful. I know a lot of people do. I'm not saying anything poorly about mental health, just personally for me. I respond better when I'm moving. I noticed. I never felt truly comfortable in talk therapy. So as I grew and understood that movement made me feel better, though I didn't understand why, perhaps, and needed to research more. And then I went on this whole dissertation track, Ph.D. of like exercise is the end all. And this is how everyone's going to get better if they just exercise all the time. And then my husband went into residency and I was trying to finish my PhD. And there was so much stress with a newborn and a 2-year-old, and the exercise was no longer enough. And so there I was writing my PhD. And as I mentioned at the women's conference, I was like, I'm writing this dissertation and I feel like I'm so full of crap right now because we're living it and it's not enough, right? So that was my second big behavioral change in life. The first one was in college there. And then the second one of like just being in the throes of life, with kids and career and education. And then understanding that you can't just go out and exercise and expect for your life to get better. There has to be a purpose behind it. You have to use it as a catalyst. You have to use it as a dress rehearsal for stress, because what happens when you exercise is that the brain becomes more malleable. It becomes heightened for learning. And so going back to our hunter-gatherer anthropology, our mammalian instincts, right? If we're running, if an animal is running, what are they doing? They're trying to survive. They're trying to eat. They're trying to not be eaten. They're perhaps trying to mate. They're perhaps trying to find a place to live. All of these things of which are worth remembering. So the brain, when you're moving, you're in a heightened state of learning and memory. So that is the time to really create those new synaptic connections. So I've noticed, and I have absolutely zero research to back this up. This is my 20 years of experience, is that when people get uncomfortable in a workout, they respond the same way emotionally as they do when they become uncomfortable psychologically, right? Like outside, there's emotional discomfort, there's a disagreement or whatnot. So some people during a workout they'll disengage, they'll shut down. Some people will get angry. Some people will try and just hurry through it and, get out of there, remove themselves from it. So these are all things to note for yourself, right? So point being, when you go into these these workouts, these exercises, one, you need to make yourself uncomfortable. And then two, you need to have a plan in place of how you want to respond under pressure. How do you want to respond under stress? And then you need to train yourself to do that. Still to this day, I will catch myself saying negative things when I get uncomfortable in a workout, and I have to counter cue, like, oh, this run feels awful today, or man, I cannot lift this weight. And I'm like, stop it. I'm like, or you could have chosen to not be here. You could choose to not lift weights today. You're here, you're doing it. You're 40 some years old and you're still climbing ropes. Like, I think you're fine, so whatever it is that you need to do, but those counter cues need to be in there, and you have to have them pre-established before you go into your exercise routine so that you can practice those. You can practice how you want to respond when you're uncomfortable, when you are being pressured.
What I'm hearing from you is that I should probably be reading my textbook that I am trying to learn for my current summer class while I'm on the treadmill, because my brain is more receptive to the information. Because, my dear, I cannot retain any of that information right now.
That's so funny that you say that, because that was one of my dissertation studies. No kidding. I did a learning and memory seated, so sedentary walking and light jog on a treadmill. And really it's relative to your, in some capacity, relative to your fitness level. But generally, so if you're at a low level, like generally a walk for most people, where you're still able to concentrate and not have to really think about the fact that you're walking, but you're still moving, you will consolidate that faster. Absolutely.
There's so much. I'm in sports science. And so we have the NSCA textbook, but there's usually 6 to 8 additional articles to read every week. And then there's tests, quizzes, and I am drowning and I can't remember any of the information.
So there is, yes, it's walking while you're reading, if you can, at a low level, but also like immediately when you're done exercising. So that heightened learning is, it stays with you for another, generally about an hour or so afterwards. So, you have a window of time, but absolutely. Yes.
Oh my gosh, I need a bigger window. So as you were talking, and I was thinking about Jason, finger quotes Jason again. And if you could wave your magic wand, let's just say he worked for an agency where physical fitness training was mandatory and prescribed. And so let's say there's a coach coming in to work with the entire group. What type of a training program in general and a message could we be giving to someone like that to help them without knowing that they're being helped? Does that even make sense?
Absolutely. I see it clearly in my head. I actually have done these like team building and whatnot with, emergency responders and physicians, emergency physicians. And again, it's giving them a purpose beyond the physical, right? So yes, you're pushing them like any other, we're strength and conditioning coaches, right? We're like, no, you will push yourself like to your limits right now. That's the goal, right? Is to overreach and adapt. And also you need to do that cognitively and emotionally as well. You need to overreach and adapt. So when you get uncomfortable, good, lean into it. How would you respond right now? And this is in the thick of it. Like I would be walking around as they're super pissed that they're in the middle of doing whatever they're doing, and very uncomfortable. And I'm like, now you counter cue, listen to whatever you're saying. That's how you naturally respond. How do you want to respond? How would you want your athletes, your employees, your team to respond? Do that now. Speak to yourself that way right now. Change your dialogue, internal dialogue right now. And do it again and again, as often as you need to, till we complete this, so that you can look back on this moment of discomfort and be proud of yourself for how you responded internally.
It's interesting that you said pride, because Kelly Kennedy and I have had a lot of discussions about pride, because it never occurred to me before to ask someone, what would make you feel proud? So when we talk about goal setting or what are you trying to get out of hiring me, it never occurred to me to ask what would make you feel proud. And that is one of her bread and butter questions. What would make you feel proud? And it's so interesting that you said that.
It's great. Who doesn't? There's not an adult I know that still doesn't smile, that like little kid smile when someone says they're proud of them. It's like, oh, thank you. I'm proud of me too. You know, everybody loves it. It does not matter your age, you know? So if you can be proud of yourself, I mean, there's no greater internal reward than that. So, and there's times, you know, clients will battle it. And I think I practice this myself, and with my clients as well. Like, you also have to give yourself leniency, especially when you're trying to rewire those connections, right? Because you will practice it, you'll think about it in your workouts, you know, and you will have a set plan. And sometimes you will still deviate from those, whether it's with your spouse, your family, your children, you know. If you can then go back to them though, and this is where it shows that you're learning, because then it sets in that you're not proud of yourself afterwards. And you're like, dang it, that was not it. I had this goal. I have this response goal, this behavioral goal, this goal of cognitive control. And that expected value of control, I did not implement in that moment. But the ability to go back to that person and say and verbalize that. I did not respond the way that I wanted to. This is how I should have responded. And you vocalize it then. Generally, people are taken a little off guard because, let's be honest, that's not something you hear every day, right? To see someone so vulnerable and also so self-aware. And it again, that becomes what you're proud of. So no, you may not have done it in the first place, but you were still able to step back, recognize the behavior, and then vocalize that you are still trying to change it. And next time that will pop up sooner, right? So you're still making that synaptic connection, albeit slightly removed from the situation.
It's similar to, what do they say about a dog? You want to reward them immediately. we have a little bit more time with those synaptic connections.
Yes.
You are like popping off the best transitions. Congratulations, my lady. Mm-hmm. I have questions for you about intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. And here's why I'm asking. Mm-hmm. Our candidates that are showing up, to be clear, I'm speaking specifically about a university-based academy, which is very much different than a fire department-based academy. The fire department-based academy, I call them kids. Those individuals have a job. They're being paid to be there. They're hired. So to me, it's a little bit different. I'm talking about, these are college students who signed up for this fire academy. I am finding that there is a lot of extrinsic motivation. They'll work hard if I'm watching over them, telling them they're doing a good job. Potentially, I'm not a big yeller during exercise, hardly ever yell, but encouraging. Mm-hmm. But if we are extrinsically motivating people, and the reason that they are performing is because they are being extrinsically motivated, how then do they ever transfer that skill set to the fire service or the police service or even military? Because they never learned how to motivate themselves. I'm talking specifically about fitness, but also these types of people sometimes aren't the best employees either, because they constantly have to be told what to do. Mm-hmm. Can you wave any sort of a magic wand for me here, girl?
With the same wand I'm trying to wave on my 9-year-old daughter right now. So I always tell my children, integrity is what? And they say, doing the right thing even when nobody is watching.
Yes.
And I said, integrity equates to what? And then sometimes they'll fall silent. I'm like, pride, being proud of yourself, knowing that you did it because it's something that you wanted to do, not because it's the right thing to do, because that's subjective towards people. It's because you wanted to do it. And if it's worth doing, it's worth doing correctly. Right. So again, that compelling purpose, I come back to, and I talk to this with athletes and clients and my children, that who do you want to be as a person? And generally with my kids, I'm speaking to them about like their coaches, right? Who do you want to be seen as by your coach, by your teacher, by mom and dad? My clients, like, how do you want your children to see you? How do you want your employees to see you? How do you want your team to view you? Because that is demonstrated in your day-to-day tasks, right? So when you're working with these young athletes, young students, I think that's a thing to ask them. And again, going back to what we talked about, your compelling purpose is, why are you here? What compelled you to be in this position? Because you're not mandated to. You signed up, you chose. So there's your autonomy, that you have a choice here. But then now you're choosing to only perform if someone has eyes on you, or if someone is requesting that you do so. So let me ask you, if I was never here to put you through this workout and there was simply a paper that had it on it, how would you perform? And why? Why would you perform one way or another? And does that make you proud of yourself? And if not, how would you change it? And why would you change it? They have to do a little internal searching. I think they get so used to, I go to class and I just do what I'm told, and I get that. So it takes a minute to make them step back and understand. I speak to my students about this at University of Denver. You signed up for this class. You wanted to learn this information. So what changed? Or has it? Right? And are your behaviors demonstrating your desire and your choice to be present here?
You just reminded me of a quote from Jim Davis, who was just named High School Strength and Conditioning Coach of the Year. By the way, shout out to Jim Davis. But do your actions match your goals?
It's that simple.
So smart. So I heard you and I wrote it down. Who do you want to be seen as a person? Why are you here? You have a choice to be here. And I'm going to be very honest with you. I could have used these words this morning at the academy class. Okay. We have a student who, it's really, really interesting. Like, yes, when the instructor looks away, sometimes people slack off a little bit. And when the instructor turns back, they're, the jumping jacks are bigger or whatever. I get that. But the student can do the work as long as you are, by you, I mean me, I am standing over him and telling him what exactly to do. Harder, faster, stronger, keep going. He does fine. And the second I turn away, it's like it just stops. And so today, Fridays is kind of their tough training session. It's job task training. And so they've been wearing, I am not a fan of doing physical fitness in your gear, but this is job task circuits. So they're doing things like sledgehammer strikes and step ups to simulate ladder and whatever, dragging dummies. So they have this circuit that's set up and it's kind of on the honor system. I have them work in pairs, but they kind of have to go in different orders because they might get to a station and there's no equipment. So it's kind of on the honor system. And one of the hardest things of the whole circuit they have to do is pick up a 40-pound sandbag with one hand and then I guess it would be suitcase carry it halfway around the building with one hand and switch off and come back in. And it's hard. The building is big. And I noticed this particular student that I was talking about, he was skipping it. Every time, every round, he didn't do it. And so a typical academy, probably what would happen is I would scream at them all and then I would make everyone do punishment push-ups while he watched or some stupid crap like that. But I'm not into that. And so I stopped everybody and I said, okay, it looks like everybody's done with 3 rounds. We have 1 more round to go, but I want to talk to you. How many of you have done every single repetition of every single exercise without cheating or skipping any? And every single hand went up. And I believe that all the rest of the students had done it. And he proudly, like loud and proud, raised his hand. And I was like, how can you absolutely just lie to my face? But this is when I needed these words, because everyone in the classroom, including me, knew that he was lying. Who do you want to be seen as a person? Does this represent who you are? Mm-hmm. And if it does, I'm not sure this is the right place for you.
And yes, that's incredibly frustrating. And you do want to get to the bottom of it. And I've learned with athletes through coaching, students who do the same thing, to step back. And I know it's hard. It's difficult for me as well. But to come from a place of compassion is that this behavior is likely, it's very easy to write it off as laziness. Mm-hmm. It's likely also a defense mechanism. Why? For what? What are you afraid of? Are you afraid to fail? Are you afraid to try and fail? Are you afraid to give your best and still feel that it's not enough? So then you just don't.
Interesting.
Right? So
I could have won that race, but I wasn't trying my hardest.
Mm-hmm. And asking those questions when it's likely they would expect someone to come at them the way that you said, right? Scream at them, do whatever punishment. So it takes people off guard to say, this looks like a defense mechanism. What are you afraid of?
Well, it's really interesting you said that, because my solution, I again didn't scream. Everyone proudly said they did every single rep. And so I said, I want to mix this up now. So you've been working with these particular pairs. Go find someone else to be a pair. And I had already pre-designated, they have company officers. So they're called Engine 1, Engine 2, blah, blah, blah. So his company officer had already told me he was going to work with him. And he did, he encouraged him, babysat him, whatever you want to call it. And they were not the last group to finish. He can do it.
For him. Yeah. And I'm wondering if he knew that he could do that before that moment. Legit wondering.
Maybe not. That's so enlightening.
Here's what else I would do with that gentleman is I would put him in charge of running the workout one day.
I had considered asking the cadre if he could be the company officer at the very least, and to see, but I like that. I'm making a note of that. So, and I know this is asking you to speculate on something you could probably not even guess, but do you have any idea what his response would have been had I screamed at him, called him out?
I think that quintessentially what will happen is a very acute change in behavior. But if it's not an internal desire, if it's not a compelling purpose, it will not last. He will still be doing it because he got in trouble, right? It's the same thing we do with our athletes, with our children, that we never want them to change their behavior because they got yelled at. You want them to change their behavior because of the person they want to be.
You're so smart. Listeners, before I hit record, I told Tessa, I'm like, I don't know what we're going to talk about. I just know that we have to have a conversation. And look where we are. Compelling purpose. That might be the title of the podcast.
Yeah, I love it.
I love it too. All right. So we're getting to about the attention span length of the typical firefighter. And so here's where I usually try to start wrapping stuff up. But before I wrap things up, my question is always, is there a direction that we should have talked about, or something that you were excited to share that I did not get you to?
Here's the thing that I just find very hysterical. I know you have a lot of female listeners, a lot of very strong females who juggle the very intense demands of a tactical position. And then also juggle being the primary caretaker and the primary, home manager, they like to call them these days. And so there's a lot there. And I just literally, and I laughed out loud when I'm looking at some of the new research coming out on cognitive control, because they're utilizing basically multitasking to train cognitive control. And I was like, oh my gosh, they're trying to train men like women's brains. How interesting. So, for example, they're putting like these random control trials where they're putting people through, having to make decisions and whatnot while they're under a load. And then also there's like either a positive or negative affect coming at them. So you've got 3 different stimuli, right? And I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, ask any mother who's walking down the stairs with a giant basket of laundry, and there is a child that's like, mom, watch me, mom. And there's 18 toys in the way, and there's another child that's screaming, and you're not sure if that's a laugh or if they're like actually dying kind of squeal. And then also, the doorbell's ringing or the dog's barking, and it's like, yeah, no, we do this all the time anyway. Like, when they say like, right, a woman's mind has like 75 open tabs, right? Windows open. And then my husband's like, oh, you're leaving. Can you write down every single event that's happening? And then also, can you help me put it in my calendar so that I don't forget anything? And then also text me while I'm gone about what needs to happen. Now, this man saves lives. He's a decorated war veteran. He has accolade after accolade after accolade. I'm just saying men's brains don't work the same. So it really cracks me up that now the cognitive research is going to train men's brains to trying to handle things the way women have always learned to do.
You just opened up a rabbit hole, because I've been having this conversation for about a month now. I'm really, really interested in epigenetic expression, as just kind of like a side, even a side hustle, just like shit that lives rent free in my brain.
Yep.
And for the listeners that maybe don't know what that means, we're not actually changing the DNA. So it's not like a deletion or an insertion. It's changing the expression of the DNA, and it can change based on your sleep. It can change on nutrition. It can be transient. It can change on trauma. Mm-hmm. I'm sure heat exposure. There's just tons of different ways that can change the expression of your DNA. And so I have been asking this question. Do you think it is because of the social dynamics that we have had for a really long time, whereby, say, the female generally stayed at home, took care of the house or whatever? Have we actually changed the expression of men's DNA so that now they are less capable of doing the things that, like you're asking, the multitasking? Has the DNA expression changed?
In short, I would say yes. Obviously, it depends on the environment and even your geographical location. I would say it's just immensely, to say multifactorial is an understatement.
Right.
Right. I think it's hard to be male or female, or however you might identify as in this day and age. I think that it is hard to fit into a traditional, what we call traditional gender role, because there's so much gray right now. And they're, again, like you said, opening a whole different, Pandora's box, we'll call it, there is research that men's general testosterone levels are lower now than they've ever been. Men who are married for many, many years also have lower testosterone levels than men who are not. But I mean, I think it's hard where females are. I think it's hard for both right now. Females are being told like, you can do anything, and because of that, we're doing everything. And so we're spread very thin in a position where we already were, right? And so there is generally not a female I know who is not doesn't have some guilt about something that she's not giving her whole self to because she's pulled in so many directions. I think that men also are trying to find their way as well. I have conversations with many men who are trying to be all of those things, and many of which are really not innate to how the male brain operates. And yeah, you can go back into our very, traditional roles, which it's not accurate. When they say like hunter gatherers, like the men went out and hunted and the female stayed and they foraged and took care of, the family or whatnot. That's actually not true. And that's been proven, that both genders, both sexes hunted, and both sexes foraged and whatnot. But that doesn't change the way that things are perceived or the way, like, the neurodynamics, right? So I would say very much that men are trying to navigate this new world, and it's been shown in the research that men are very good at focusing on one single task, where women are not. We're just not, and not as great at it. And then you can flip that and say women are really great at, I won't say multitasking, but task switching, where men are very much not. So yeah, it's tough on both sides of the coin right now.
Right. That was a rabbit hole, Pandora's box. Yeah. I also just got very excited because I think I heard a dog walking around.
Oh my gosh, 2 of them. Yes.
Oh, this is always the last thing of the podcast. We talk about the dogs.
I love this part.
Yes. And so please tell me about your furry friends.
Okay. They're both rescues. I'm a runner. And I used to live in Evergreen, Colorado, where there's bears and there's elk and there's coyotes and all the things that will try and beat me up by myself. So I had to bring my dogs. And so I have a Vizsla mix. They're both part Redbone Coonhound. So there's Redbone Coonhound and Vizsla, and there's Redbone Coonhound and Ridgeback. And I'm very partial to the Ridgebacks. I had a full blood Ridgeback before. And yeah, they're my red run-in dogs.
Your red run-in dogs. And what are their names?
Odin and Valkyrie.
Oh my gosh. I love it. Will you please do me a favor and text me a picture of said furry friends after we sign off?
Of course. I have to tell you, Valkyrie, she saved me when she was just a puppy from a very, very mad mama elk. We came around a corner, just the wrong time, wrong place in the spring. And I was actually trying to stay away from the lake where all the mama and babies are with their elk. I was trying to stay away from there. We came around the bend on the trail, and she was not 15 feet from me, just already snarling. And this huge elk, her baby was clearly somewhere in the tall grass around. And little tiny Val, who at that point was just running like a mile with me because she was little, so she's probably nine months or so, 10. She just took on that elk. She just, and like grabbed her and tried to stomp on her and whatnot. Nope, she got out of there. Isn't that great?
She gets an extra treat today.
Yeah.
I love that. Well, as expected, this was a fantastic conversation. I am so excited to release this to all of my listeners. And I'm pretty sure we can just probably drop the mic now. What do you think?
I think it's great. I want to open it. You'll probably post my contact info, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So if anyone, has questions, wants ideas on that how to verbalize like compelling purpose and things like this, and incorporating, a cognitive control and cognitive change, behavioral change purpose into your physical training regimen, please reach out. I'm happy to help with that. It's very, and you can do it not only to change personal, but also, professional mindsets. How do you want them to respond, in certain given situations, in the field? So my door is totally open to that.
That is very generous, my friend. Thank you very much. And with that, I think we are going to drop the mic. It's AZ and Tessa, and we are officially out.
Thank you.